On this day in 1939, Celtic played their last competitive match before the outbreak of the Second World War. There can have been few present at Celtic Park for the Scottish League Division 1 match against Clyde on the 2nd of September 1939 who did not feel a sense of deep foreboding as the play unfolded. There must also have been few schoolboys in the crowd, with the evacuation of children from the city having begun the previous day. To read the Glasgow Herald of the 1st of September 1939 gives the impression that Britain was already at war. Under the headline, "Evacuation of Scottish Schoolchildren," the paper reported, "The government's three-day plan to evacuate over 250,000 persons from Glasgow, Edinburgh, Dundee, Clydebank and Rosyth to other parts of Scotland is to be put into operation today. About 70,000 persons, including schoolchildren, preschool children, mothers and helpers, will be evacuated today from Glasgow. They will be drawn, on the suggestion of the government, from congested and thickly populated areas in the city. From as early as 6:30 this morning, children and those being evacuated with them will report at the various assembly schools. It is likely that the work of sending them off to their destinations will be completed by this afternoon. This will be carried out with the full cooperation of the police, and it is likely that certain streets will be closed to public use." The front page of the Daily Record on the morning of the match had a similarly ominous tone, headlined, "18 to 41 call-up in Britain coming." The report began, "The Prime Minister announced in the House of Commons last night that a bill will be laid before the House which, for all practical purposes, will amount to an expansion of the Military Training Act, and all fit men between 18 and 41 will be rendered liable to military service if and when called. Parliament will sit today at 2:45. A sitting tomorrow is possible. Britain, in a state of general mobilisation and with every city, town and village in total darkness, last night awaited Hitler's answer to the government's last warning to withdraw his army from Polish territory." It's totally incongruous to turn to the Record's sports pages that day and read the usual speculations on lineups and form in the previews of that day's football action, although there was a notice at the top of the page reading, "Last night, the football authorities in both England and Scotland intimated that unless there was government intervention, football games, as arranged, would go on today. The feeling in officialdom is that the sport should be carried on unless orders from Whitehall decree otherwise, and the two associations have no desire to take a step that would mean interfering with the ordinary routine of peacetime life. So far as Scotland is concerned, there will be no football special trains, the railway companies having cancelled these because of the heavy calls being made on rolling stock for other purposes." Celtic were keeping their cards close to their chest on the morning of the match, with no team named and nothing even for the papers to mull over. Clyde were reported to be leaving out their veteran Irish centre-half Eddie Falloon, who had joined them the previous year after a decade at Aberdeen, whom he had captained in their losing Scottish Cup final against Celtic in 1937. The interwar period was a difficult time for Celtic, who saw Rangers dominate the Scottish League for extended periods. They had been prevented from equalling Celtic's 6-in-a-row record only by Motherwell in 1931-32, the only time anyone other than Celtic or Rangers won the league between the wars. If not for that solitary Motherwell triumph, Rangers would have completed 9 in a row by 1934-35. Celtic won the championship only 5 times between the wars, but the appointment of Jimmy McMenemy as assistant to Willie Maley coincided with a revival in the later 30s as they won the title in 1936 and 1938. The match against Clyde on the 2nd of September was only the 5th game of season 1939-40, and although Celtic had lost 3-1 to Aberdeen both home and away by the third round of fixtures, they had won the other 2 against Hearts and Cowdenbeath. Before a crowd of just 5,000 on a pleasant late summer afternoon, Celtic lined up Kennaway, Hogg, Kelly, Geetins, O'Neill, Patterson, Lynch, MacDonald, Crum, Divers, Murphy. The Scotsman of the 4th of September 1939, the day after Britain and France's declaration of war on Germany, made no mention of the international situation in its match report, writing obliquely, The humid atmosphere and small crowd obviously affected the players at Parkhead, and it was not until the second half of the game that Celtic and Clyde were really able to concentrate on the job in hand. In the second half, Celtic came to life and scored 3 minutes after the restart through a brilliant piece of individual play by John Divers. A nephew of the great Patsy Gallagher and father of Celtic's 1960s forward of the same name, he beat 3 men on the right flank before shooting across the keeper, and it was helped into the net by a Clyde defender desperately trying to clear it off the line. Celtic bombarded the Clyde goal for the next 20 minutes, but some industrial defending saw Divers and Johnny Crumb sent to opposite wings carrying injuries, and Joe Kennaway made some great saves to keep Celtic's lead intact. Reality hit home the following day. Waverley reported in the Daily Record on the 4th of September 1939. Yesterday, the government announced the suspension for the nonce of all forms of entertainment. These of course include sports gatherings, so that we don't know when we shall have a resumption of football. All players' contracts were voided by that announcement on the 3rd of September, and although football would resume within the month, it was completely unofficial. The Scottish League and the Scottish Cup were suspended for the duration of the war, and unofficial regional league competitions were introduced. Due to petrol rationing making travel difficult, and the fact players were either called up for military service or required to work full-time jobs in reserved occupations, the clubs were split into Western and Eastern leagues for the remainder of season 1939-40, and then Southern and North Eastern leagues from 1940-41. The directors decided to all but mothball Celtic for the duration, and Willie Maley was replaced as manager by Jimmy McStay in 1940. It was a very different Celtic, not to mention a very different world, who emerged from the war, with Jimmy McGrory installed as manager by the time official competition resumed in August 1946. They would find, having turned off the machine, it was very difficult to get it going again.